So I'm Phil Schaap. I'm the curator of Jazz at Lincoln Center, and I've been trying to map out the reasons why jazz was born in New Orleans. And I was starting to piece it together for you, and the overarching guide is the Afro-Western hybrid in the New World. But the New Orleans specifics are what I'm trying to get into. And I haven't even brought up geography. You know about the Mississippi River? It's the biggest river in North America. And New Orleans is still the largest port in the south of the United States. So it's a win-win thing because it's the largest port. That means it's got open access to the world through the ocean. It's on the Gulf of Mexico. But the Mississippi River, the mighty Mississippi, goes all the way up to Minnesota and all the way down to Louisiana, to New Orleans. So if you go back before automotive transportation, water was everything. It's how you got around. It's how you ship goods. So New Orleans is blessed. Everything inland comes down to New Orleans. Everything in the world ports at New Orleans. So that's something I want you to know about. New Orleans is distinct for its geographical advantages with the water. 1. 2, its colonial heritage. It's all mixed up. It's French, it's Spanish, it's British. And it's got all of those flavors. Then there's the treatment of the slaves and the continuance of, and it's very unusual, of African practices as an allowed, not so much celebration, but activity for the slaves on their so-called day off, Sunday, as long as they embrace Christianity. And maybe you haven't really centered your attention on it. There's African custom in the United States after 1803. New Orleans is part of the U.S. It's the slave period still, and there's this stuff going on, African ritual, music, custom, on display. Anybody could go in New Orleans every Sunday, 52 times a year, 520 times per decade, decade after decade. And that really puts a different stamp on New Orleans. And so you have these ingredients. But if you're really going to have a good dish served up, you need a chef. And in New Orleans, towards the end of the 19th century, it was actually September 6, 1877, a man named Charles Bolden was born. He was a musician, and he heard music differently than it's ever been heard before. He heard the musical gumbo and cultural gumbo of New Orleans. He was an African American. In fact, probably when he was a child, he heard the last celebrations at Congo Square. They were eventually erased with the advent of segregation. It's a kind of funny thing to focus on. I've told you many times, this isn't the happiest of stories, but it does have some very magnificent music as a result. The Confederacy, you know, we had a rebellion here in the United States, and the Confederacy wanted to keep slavery going, and they lost. But they rebounded with something called segregation. And one of the ways that they divided the races in New Orleans is they closed down Congo Square. And some history books say, I have faith in it, that it closed in 1885. No one's to know for sure. But if it did exist from 1877 to 1885, the first jazz musician, this fellow I want to tell you about, Buddy Bolden's his name, Charles was his first name, they called him Buddy. He heard Congo Square, and he also heard everything else. And it hit his ear, and it hit his timing mechanisms in a way that caused him to play the music, but phrase it differently. He phrased it with a rhythmic lilt that we call swing.